Well, here we are again. It's our awkward period between the main Persona entries where we get treated to the spin-offs. I distinctly remember wishing it would end around when the last dancing game came out. In spite of that though, I found it to be a pretty enjoyable game overall. And this is coming from someone who usually isn't into rhythm games. Here we are with more entries in this sub-series. This time representing Persona 3 and the more recent Persona 5. I'm sure we're all very familiar with them at this point. Persona 3, Dancing in Moonlight, and Persona 5, Dancing in Starlight. Both are being released at the same time, and both are considered separate games. So to own both of them will cost you the price of 2 games. Or you can get the Endless Night edition, which comes with both games and a PS4 version of Persona 4 Dancing All Night, which will hereby be referred to as Dan. Having already owned Dan on Vita, I was hesitant to get both games at launch. I am but a poor British child. Especially after buying the PlayStation VR, which this game has some functionality with. You can ogle the waifus to your heart's content. Oh, it's very nice. So, is it worth it? Let's find out, shall we?
Enough with the dancing!
The gameplay is virtually identical to Dan. You have 6 buttons plus the scratch button, which can be either the right thumbstick or L1 or R1. Only the 6 buttons on screen are the ones you have to hit though. The scratches are mostly for score. By the footage on screen, you've probably figured out everything you need to know. They're not complicated games. The only gameplay difference I noticed from Dan is those double notes, which are just 2 notes that are close together. Apart from this, it's all identical to Dan, which isn't a bad thing because that game was pretty good. Something else you can figure out from the footage is that I'm not very good at it. I'm really bad at rhythm games, okay? It's not my genre. I haven't played many of them, but I can tell you right now that this is far easier than those Hatsune Miku games. And I definitely know it's easier than Parappa the Rapper. I could never get past the stage with the cooking chicken. Not because I suck at the game, which I do, but because that stage is just broken. I swear, the rhythm is off and it's impossible to beat. Parappa is an overrated game, guys. At least in this game you get more than 6 songs and all of them work. So anyway, the track list is very similar to Dan, at least quality-wise. There's quite a few dutty remixes, but also some bizarre and not so dutty ones.
Oh yeah!
And then there's some that aren't even remixes at all. They're just the unaltered tracks from their respective games. These are definitely the weakest, as they were in Dan too. Mainly because they weren't designed for this kind of game in mind, and you can feel it. The track lists of both games are fine, if a little on the short side. Now this is where we get into the part that will turn people off, myself included. There are a lot of DLC tracks and costumes. There's definitely a lot more focus on selling DLC this time around, which is a bit cheeky considering that these are full-priced games that are already light on content as is. I'm not going to say that what you get in the base game isn't worth it, but it's hard to recommend at full price. You might have also heard that there's no story mode in either games. This is both true and false. There is a story here, but it's very different to the one in Dan. There's no lengthy visual novel, and if you ask me, that may have been for the best. The story of Dan was better than it had any right to be, but it's not something I would ever want to see again. It took the very silly concept of having a Persona dancing game and got a little ambitious with it. These two don't take that approach. In fact, it feels like they aren't taking the concept seriously at all.
Why must we dance, though? You need to give us a reason.
Why, you ask? Well...
Yeah, Elizabeth is Atlas right now. desperately trying to come up with a reason for why these characters have to dance. They don't have much, okay? And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. There doesn't always have to be some complicated reason to have these characters do stuff. At least not for the weird spin-off games. There's no unseen evil god behind the scenes manipulating things to make this one happen. And that's kind of refreshing in a weird way. What replaces story are the social events. As you play songs and meet certain criteria, you unlock more of these fun little vignettes with the characters. After you sit through these, you unlock costumes and accessories to use during songs. I quite enjoyed this. It was good motivation to keep grinding on songs until I got a good score. I think I might have preferred Tanaka's store from Dan though. That's something I wish was still around. These segments are quite nice as I love all of these characters. And extra time with best girls Haru and Aigis, don't at me, is time well spent. Are all of these events building up to anything? Well, kind of, as frivolous and silly as it may be, but I can't speak any more about the plot. There is a story is the point I'm trying to make. It's just not as ambitious or in-depth as Dan's. And saying Dan over and over again, it makes me feel like I'm talking about a person. I had a boss named Dan once, but let's forget about those dark times. Between the two games, I think I got more enjoyment out of the Persona 3 one. Mostly because of the novelty of seeing their character models in the same style as Persona 5. They look absolutely gorgeous. Especially Fuka, oh my god. She was never this cute in the original game. And why is she staring at me like that? She's just so adorable I can't turn my eyes away. I'm just gonna hold on her for a few more seconds if that's okay. There isn't quite as much novelty with the Persona 5 characters since they look pretty much the same as they did in Persona 5. But it was interesting seeing more interactions between the characters. We actually get to see Haru and Yusuke have a conversation. That stood out to me because I'm pretty sure they said like one thing to each other in the entirety of Persona 5. With that being said, these are kind of pointless and don't amount to much. So I got bored during a lot of them. I know you guys were probably expecting me to hate on these games or something. It's Atlus milking Persona 3 characters once again, and the Persona 5 characters for the very first time, but certainly not the last. But aside from the questionable choices with DLC, it's a pretty decent game. I still say that Dan was the better game, but not by a large margin. I'm disappointed that so many of the best costumes are DLC, such as Trap Maid Minato, and sexy Nazi dominatrix Trap Ren, oh my god, and any other costume that turns them into traps that I may be forgetting. I think greed may have gotten the better of Atlus this time around. They didn't even include the soundtrack with the special edition like they did with Dan. Let's just hope this DLC issue doesn't become bigger as the years go on. I didn't even intend on getting this game at launch, let alone making a video on it, but to my shock I got a review copy. Nobody ever sends me review copies. Anyway, I've been Stickety Slice, I'll see you around.